Today, Trevor Lawrence and Jalen Hurts have been put back into college to compete in college football bingo. Whoever completes a goal on the board first will get a point along with that spot on the board. If both players complete a goal at the same time, then they will share that spot on the board and be given half a point. If a player gets a bingo, then they'll be given an additional 3 points. I will be simulating until the board is completely filled or if it is mathematically impossible for a player to catch up. Comment down below who else should compete in college football bingo. Now it's time to go over all the spaces on the board. Free spot, win the Heisman, win the Natty, finish 12-0 in the regular season, have less than 7 interceptions in a season, have 4,000 or more passing yards in a season, have 500 or more rushing yards in a season, break a school record, 65% or better completion percentage, have a receiver get over 1,200 receiving yards, win the conference championship, make the playoffs, win a bowl game, 35 plus passing touchdowns, 7 plus rushing touchdowns, all conference first team, reach 99 overall, 45 plus total touchdowns, become the national player of the week, be a Heisman finalist, finish the season top 5 in passing yards, win a head-to-head matchup, and get 10 plus wins in a season. Before getting things underway, I should also mention that both players will start out at an 84 overall and will start for their teams each year. I will also make sure that their strength of schedule is the same each year to make things as fair as possible. This is what the board looks like going in the beginning of the first season, with the only spot being claimed is the free space. And in year number 1, Bama's coming in at a 97 overall with a 99 defense. This Bama team looks extremely good with a lot of juniors that are already in the 90 overall threshold, so I would imagine next year that they would be a 99 overall team. Taking a look at the Clemson Tigers, they're only at a 91 overall with a 93 offense, and this team is really good but definitely doesn't compare to the team that we saw for Alabama. It's now time to jump to the midpoint of the season where Alabama is currently sitting with a 5-1 record. Jalen Hurts to this point has been playing pretty well with only 1 interception to 10 passing touchdowns, and has already accumulated a nice 170 rushing yards. The only space on the board that could be claimed is a National Player of the Week, and it looks like right here we have our first spot that'll be claimed on the board. With Jalen Hurts becoming National Player of the Week, we finally have our first spot on the board taken up, and that gives Jalen a 1-point lead over Trevor Lawrence. Switching over to the ACC, things aren't looking as good for Clemson though, they're sitting at a 3-3 record, but Lawrence has very similar passing stats to Jalen Hurts as he only has 1 interception to 10 passing touchdowns with 1,300 passing yards. And his rushing yards, yeah, there's no point even talking about them. It would now be time to simulate the rest of the season and see how the teams do. Lawrence finished with an impressive freshman season with over 3,000 passing yards and 29 passing touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, but he didn't get over 65% completion percentage, so that won't be one of the spots on the board. Tell me how this man only had 14 rushing yards. I mean, I know he's Trevor Lawrence and doesn't rush a lot, but come on. Clemson would reinvent their season, however, as they finished first in the ACC Atlantic, and after we saw them at 3-3, I thought their season would be over, but they finished the season on a 7-game winning streak, including some key wins over some good teams. Taking a look at Jalen's stats, he would finish the season with 23 passing touchdowns and 2,700 passing yards, and on the rushing aspect of things, he did really well with 363 rushing yards along with 6 touchdowns to add on to that. Bama would have a much better season as they would finish 11-1, are currently sitting at number 4th in the nation, and their only loss this year came to Ole Miss earlier in the season when they had a 7-point loss. But just look at some of these scores. They beat Auburn 80-7. That doesn't even make sense. Now both players would be looking to get the conference championship and fill out space on the board, however, and starting off simulating the ACC championship where Clemson taking on North Carolina. Unfortunately for Trevor Lawrence, his team would end up losing by 12 points to a good team. Bama would have a much tougher opponent in undefeated Georgia going into their game, and that proved here as they got absolutely throttled in their game against the Bulldogs. Clemson would have the great honor of participating in the Cheez-It Bowl, and I'm sorry Duke fans, but you guys have no chance against Bama in the Peach Bowl. There was changes to the board that needed to be made, however, with both teams getting over 10 plus wins this season, meaning that they would now claim the Nick Saban spot on the board and Jalen Hurts would be up by 1 point still. Already down by 1, this would be a huge game for Trevor Lawrence, who would need to win, and jumping into the third quarter, the team was currently up by 7 points and they were looking to get another score on the board. That's exactly what happened as Trevor Lawrence handed off in the next play, and from there the Tigers would go on to win as they would cruise to an easy victory over Texas Tech in the Cheez-It Bowl. It was now time for Jalen Hurts and the Crimson Tide to answer back, and on Bama's first drive of the game, they would go all the way down the field and punch it in for a score. This game went exactly as I expected as Bama would destroy Duke and even add insult to injury at the end of the game, and thankfully for Jalen Hurts, he was able to answer back in what was a dominating win over the Blue Devils. Looking at the board now, they would both share the space of winning a bowl game, and after making the adjustments to the board, Jalen would still be up by 1 point. Jalen's stats to end his freshman season were extremely good, and looking at his rushing stats, he would end up getting 7 rushing touchdowns, meaning that he would claim another spot on the board. But Bama didn't even have a receiver that crossed the 850-yard threshold. Trevor Lawrence would also have some really good stats to finish his freshman season, and he just missed out on the 65% completion percentage goal. But after looking at the stats, both players had less than 7 interceptions, meaning that they now claim that spot on the board. And looking at the receivers for Clemson, however, they had a receiver with almost 1,400 receiving yards. What a season. Trevor Lawrence would be able to claim the Devontae Smith spot on the board with the receiver getting over 1,200 yards. And don't think I forgot about Jalen Hurts' 7 rushing touchdowns, as he was able to claim the Cam Newton spot on the board and take his lead back by 1. During the offseason, Clemson would finish with the 46th best class in the nation, whereas Alabama would finish with a top 10 class, getting 2 5-stars. This is what the season would look like for Bama going into year number 2 if they had an A- strength of schedule. So like I said at the beginning of the video, I made sure Clemson had the same strength of schedule, and this is the season that they were going to have going into year number 2. And Dabo Swinney must have roided up his team because they made a huge leaps jumping into a 99 overall with 99 offense as well. Even with having a great overall jump, they were projected to finish 2nd in the ACC behind Florida State, and this team made a lot of improvements over the offseason as they have tons of players over 92 overall. And speaking of players over 92 overall, Trevor Lawrence Lawrence would jump all the way up to 93 overall during the offseason. Lawrence would also be named to the first team for all conference, so Lawrence would be able to tie things up at 4 apiece after claiming that spot. Taking a look at the other side, Bama jumped up to 99s across the board, and they were projected to finish first in their tough conference over Oklahoma. And this team looks amazing. They look like they could have a championship run this year with the quality of talent that they have on this team, and it definitely helps that Jalen Hurts to jump up to a 92 overall during the offseason. And halfway through the year, Bama is sitting undefeated at number 2 in the nation. That is great for Jalen Hurts and even better for him, as he is currently sitting at number 2 in the Heisman watch in the entire nation. He is currently sitting at 22 passing touchdowns to only 1 interception and currently has a 68.8 completion percentage. And of course, he's getting things done on the ground as well because it's Jalen Hurts. That's what he does. And look at this. Clemson is also sitting at an undefeated record, sitting at 6th in the nation. And Trevor Lawrence also has some really good stats with the great completion percentage, but they aren't as good as Jalen Hurts to start the season. It would now be time to simulate a couple more games into the season. After simulating 3 more games, Trevor Lawrence's stats are looking absolutely amazing. And so are Jalen Hurts. I can't believe how well these quarterbacks are playing so far. Because of that, both players would now be fighting at a chance to win the Heisman, and winning the Heisman would be extremely important for either player, as that had 2 spaces on the board for doing that. After simulating 3 more games, both teams were now in the top 4, and it looks like they may have a playoff matchup if things keep going as they are. And before we look at the teams, I simulated to the end of the season, and Trevor Lawrence finished with 39 passing touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. Jalen Hurts also had a great season, but his interceptions really picked up towards the end of the season. And things got worse for Jalen, as Trevor Lawrence was able to claim the 35+ passing touchdown spot on the board, and that would be the first time this video that he has the lead. Unfortunately for each team, they would both lose a game towards the end of the season, but both teams ended up making the conference championship yet again, and that spot on the board was still open. Throughout the first half, it was a back and forth showdown with the Hurricanes, and to open up the 4th quarter down by 1, Trevor Lawrence finally was able to step back and make a great play. He would also break a school record on that passing touchdown there, and on 4th and 19, if the Tigers got a stop here, they would end up winning the ACC, and that's exactly what they did, as the team would celebrate with Lawrence, as they would be able to hoist up the ACC championship trophy. All eyes were on Jalen Hurts and Bama in the SEC championship game, and again they were playing Georgia yet again, and things weren't looking good for them as they were down by multiple possessions until they got a score here, but their defense could not handle the Bulldogs offense as they were continually giving up points over and over. But Jalen Hurts was showing that he was a great quarterback, as he got to see him all the way down the field and scored again. It wouldn't matter though, as Georgia would end up getting a field goal and Bama would go for a run on 4th and 13, and yet again Bama would lose the conference championship. And right now it seemed like Georgia was the only thing standing in Jalen Hurts' way of dominating the college football bingo board. With that loss, Trevor Lawrence was able to claim the conference championship spot on the board. And taking a look at school records, we already know that Trevor Lawrence had broken one, but we had to make sure that Jalen Hurts didn't, and he hasn't broken one yet to this point. That would now mean that Trevor Lawrence would take a dominating 3-point lead after getting both of those spots. But good news for Jalen was that he got over 500 rushing yards. That now meant that he was able to close the gap as he got the Tim Tebow spot on the board for 500+ rushing yards in a season. Jalen definitely improved in his 2nd season, but he had a lot of interceptions and a lot of incompletions. And Trevor Lawrence's numbers in his sophomore season were incredible. This man had 44 passing touchdowns along with 2 rushing touchdowns. And unfortunately for Jalen, that meant that he was able to claim the 45+ total touchdown spot on the board. Both players would fall in the Heisman watch, but would both finish as finalists. So Jalen Hurts would still be down by 3 points after they claimed that spot. Clemson would barely miss out on making the college football playoffs, and Bama would yet again be playing in the Peach Bowl. Bama would go on to absolutely destroy Miami in their game, and Clemson would do the same against Florida Atlantic, but things were only getting worse for Jalen as Trevor Lawrence finished top 5 in passing yards with over 4,000 yards. That would be another spot on the board that Lawrence would pick up, and things would get a lot worse for Jalen as Trevor Lawrence finished with over 4,000 passing yards, meaning that the Joe Burrow spot on the top right corner was now taken. I don't even know how many times I can say this. It got even worse for Jalen at this point. Because of his great completion percentage, Trevor Lawrence would take a 6-point lead on the bingo board, and I know it looks terrible for you Jalen Hurts fans out there, but trust me, this is far from over as Jalen could still get a bingo, and if he does, he will get plus 3 points to that. This season will be crucial for both sides, and it looks like Clemson got even better as Trevor Lawrence would jump up to a high 97 overall. Bama looked absolutely amazing as well, as they always do, and Jalen Hurts is slightly behind Lawrence at a 96 overall. This is what the schedule would look like for Clemson going into year number 3, and this is what Bama's would look like, and I made sure that both teams are going to be playing each other this year. Both teams would start the season at top 5 with Clemson barely edging out Alabama, and they would also both start in the Heisman watch. This season was extremely crucial for both teams, but Bama would end up losing one of their first 3 games. That would put them at 5th in the SEC at this point, as they ended up losing to Texas, and Clemson would lose one of their first 2 games, putting them at the bottom of the ACC to start the season, and their loss came to Cincinnati. But now it was time to pit our 2 players up against each other, and this was going to be huge for Jalen Hurts if they win this game. I want to make it clear that I'm not rooting for anybody in this video, but it is vital that Jalen Hurts wins this if he wants to continue having a spot on the board. And that last play was an uncharacteristic, terrible throw that Trevor Lawrence made in the red zone, and now it was time for Alabama to try to score back. And after getting stopped on 3rd and goal, they would actually end up going for it on 4th and goal because they know the pressure here, and they didn't end up getting it. So getting close to the end of the first half, both teams were still at 0 points, even though they had multiple red zone trips, and Jalen Hurts was finally able to find a target. That would be huge for Bama going into halftime, and Clemson would end up answering back on their first drive of the 3rd quarter, and Clemson made sure to keep the throttle on as they ended up scoring back right after it. Clemson's offense had been struggling this entire game against the great Bama defense, and Trevor Lawrence was trying to keep his team in the game, and on a crucial 4th down with only 2 minutes left in the game, he ended up throwing a terrible pass, resulting in a Bama and Jalen Hurts win. Jalen would finally be able to claim another space on the board, but he would still be down by 5 points even after doing so. Simulating to halfway through the season, Clemson was looking terrible as they were sitting at a 6-5 record. I don't know what happened to the team this year, but they completely fell off the face of the earth. And even though Bama had 9 wins, they had 2 losses and were looking at a lackluster season as well. After losing one of their games earlier in the season to Texas, they would lose yet again to Oklahoma at the end of the year, and it is no surprise that neither of our players are sitting on the Heisman watch right now. And even though they weren't on the Heisman watch, they still had great stats. Trevor Lawrence is having a great junior year, but Jalen Hurts was definitely having a better one with over 3,000 passing yards, and along with 32 passing touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. Jalen would also tack on another 400 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. After simulating the last game of the season, Clemson would fall to 6-6 and miss out on the ACC championship game, whereas Bama would be playing in the SEC championship, finally not against Georgia. This game wouldn't mean much for Jalen Hurts as Trevor Lawrence already owned the conference championship spot on the board, but Bama needs this win to gain confidence because they had lost the last 2 conference championship games. Luckily for them, Jalen Hurts had been playing extremely well this game, and he was getting his team all the way down the field yet again, and with only 2 minutes left in the game on 1st and goal, they were able to extend their lead. From there, they would finally win the conference championship, and Jalen Hurts would finish top 5 in the Heisman voting. Unfortunately for Bama though, the one year they don't have to play Georgia, they have 2 losses, so they missed the playoffs, and Clemson would yet again be playing in the Cheez-It Bowl. I don't know why this keeps happening. Even after a terrible season, Clemson would go on to win a high-scoring affair against Oklahoma State, and Bama would go on to destroy number 5 FAU in the Sugar Bowl. Jalen Hurts finished with an amazing junior season with over 40 passing touchdowns and a 73% completion percentage. That is amazing. He would also add another 500 plus rushing yards to that total. Trevor Lawrence did have a good junior season, but most of his stats didn't compare to last year. As I mentioned earlier, it is crucial that Jalen Hurts gets bingo. This is what Bama looks like, and just look at all these high overall players that they have. The same can be said for Clemson, but they definitely aren't as good as Alabama is. But if you notice, both Trevor Lawrence and Jalen Hurts are now 99 overalls, so they were both able to claim the 99 overall threshold space. As always, Bama would have an extremely difficult schedule, and it was crucial for them this year that they go undefeated and Jalen Hurts has a great season. Of course, Clemson would also have an amazing season, and just remember, I am going to keep simulating until it is mathematically impossible to win, so depending on how this season goes, this may or may not be the last season. As we have been doing, we jumped halfway through the year, and Clemson was currently sitting as the number 3 team in the nation at 6-0, and like always, Trevor Lawrence's stats are looking really good with only 1 interception to this point so far. But looking at the Heisman watch, Jalen Hurts was the only one sitting on there right now. Every time we look at Jalen's stats, he was an extremely productive and effective quarterback. Look at his interception totals throughout the years. 5, 4, and 2 are amazing. Besides that 10 interception season, we don't look at that. And of course, he's getting things done on the ground, but we already know he's going to do that. But unfortunately for him, though, halfway through the season, Bama was currently sitting at a 5-1 record, so they wouldn't be able to claim the 12-0 spot on the board thus far. And simulating to the last games of the season, Clemson was sitting at 11-0 at number 2 in the nation, and Bama was currently sitting at 10-1. Luckily for Jalen Hurts, however, he was the only person still on the Heisman watch. But how does this happen every single year that Bama starts doing well? Right outside of the playoffs, they need a crucial win, and they are going down big against Michigan State. I'm disgusted. Jalen Hurts will now be a huge Gamecock fan as he needed Clemson to lose this game against South Carolina. Up by 3 points late in the 4th, Clemson was looking to kill out a lot of the clock, and Trevor Lawrence knew that they needed a first down, and they were able to just barely get that. And with them killing clock and 2 minutes left in the game on 3rd and 8, Trevor Lawrence was able to do it yet again, getting another first down. The Gamecocks would need to stop them on 4th and 3 here, which they were unable to do just barely. And that would mean that Clemson would go on to win their game, and that would put them at 12-0 and take that spot on the board. Jalen, you really blew it this year. And just look at this. Bama destroys Georgia in the SEC championship, but they couldn't do it against Michigan State. We would now take a look at Clemson in the ACC championship, and if they won this game, they would cement themselves in the college football playoffs. But things weren't looking good for them as they were down by 3, and on 3rd and 7, they weren't able to get a first down. Luckily for them, they had a good kicker, and he was able to tie up the game. But this game would go to overtime, and after Clemson got 3 on their first possession, Virginia Tech would actually go down and get the upset win. I can't believe what is happening this season. Good news for Jalen Hurts fans, however, as he would end up winning the Heisman, but with Trevor Lawrence and the Clemson Tigers going 12-0, Jalen Hurts winning that Heisman would only make the board look a little bit better in his favor, as it would now be mathematically impossible for Jalen Hurts to come back and win. To end their careers, Bama would have a great win over a number 5 opponent, and Clemson would also get a big win against FAU. This is what the board looks like after going through 4 seasons following Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence will win the first ever college football bingo on the channel. I had a great time recording this, and I hope you had a great time watching this. I'm looking to do more of these videos in the future, so please comment down below the 2 players that you want to be pit up against in the next college football bingo. It doesn't have to be quarterback specific, and it doesn't have to be players that are currently in the league. It could be whoever you guys want it to be. Just let me know down in the comments. I love you all. Take care. Peace.